The rain hammered against the windows of Mercy General in Chicago, a relentless November storm, mirroring the chaos in Jake Carter's chest. The ER buzzed with urgency nurses weaving between gurneys, but Jake barely noticed, his calloused hands still bearing the scars of his days, as a firefighter cradled his feverish 4-year-old Noah, whose forehead bore a fresh bandage from a tumble down their apartment stairs. "Hang in there, champ," Jake murmured, his voice gravelly but tender, as he adjusted Noah's grip on the crumpled photo tucked in his jacket pocket. The boy's eyelids fluttered, but he jerked awake when a woman in a tailored cream coat swept past her auburn hair, catching the fluorescent light. "Daddy, look!" Noah gasped, pointing. "It's Mommy!" Jake's blood turned to ice. There, frozen mid-stride in the hallway, stood Evelyn Shaw, now a tech mogul, with her name on half the billboards in the city. Her designer heels clicked as she spun toward them, her face draining of color when she met Jake's glare. 5 years of silence hung between them, heavy as a lead blanket. "Noah, sweetheart." Evelyn breathed, reaching out, but Jake yanked Noah closer. "She's not your mom." He growled, the lie bitter on his tongue. Noah squirmed, thrusting the photo forward, a snapshot of Evelyn laughing on a Coney Island boardwalk back when they were a family. "But it's her," he insisted, his tiny voice cracking. Jake's throat burned. He remembered the day Evelyn walked out, her father's words ringing in his ears. "A broke firefighter can't give you the life you deserve." Now, as a single dad, driving Uber nights to keep Noah in sneakers that fit Jake, had built a world without her. But the way Evelyn's fingers trembled as she wiped her tears that undid him. "I got stuck in Dubai during the floods," she blurted, as if reading his mind. "Lost my passport, my money. I tried to come back, Jake, I swear." A monitor beeped loudly nearby, punctuating the silence. Noah coughed, his small body shuddering, and Evelyn lunged forward only to stop short at Jake's warning glare. The nurse called their name, and Jake hoisted Noah up, turning away. But as he walked, Noah's whisper gutted him. "Daddy, does Mommy still love us?" Evelyn's choked sob echoed behind them. Jake paused at the exam room door, his jaw working. Then, with a sigh that carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights, he glanced back. Evelyn stood rooted, her designer bag dangling forgotten at her side, looking more like the girl he'd fallen for than the CEO she'd become. In that moment, the storm outside seemed quieter. Or maybe it was just his heart finally stilling. The taxi's headlights cut through the drizzle as Jake pulled into the dimly lit parking lot of their Chicago walk-up, the engine's growl fading into the hum of the city. Noah slept against his chest, the bandage on his forehead stark under the flickering porch light. The apartment door creaked open, revealing a living room strewn with action figures and a half-finished Lego castle, proof of the life they'd built without her. Jake lowered Noah onto his race car bed, smoothing the curls stuck to the boy's damp forehead. As he tucked him in, Noah's fingers tightened around the crumpled Coney Island photo, his whisper slicing through the dark, "Will Mommy read to me tomorrow?" Jake's hands stilled. The question hung like a grenade with the pin pulled. Across the city, in a penthouse, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, Evelyn paced. Her assistant's concerned texts glowed on the coffee table board meeting in 7 hours. But the only sound was the tap of her heels and the echo of Noah's voice. "Does Mommy still love us?" She yanked open a hidden drawer in her desk, revealing a stack of unopened envelopes, every birthday card she'd sent Jake over the years, all marked "Return to Sender." Beneath them lay a tiny onesie from the hospital, still smelling of detergent from the last time she'd held him. A sob ripped through her. She grabbed her coat. Back in the apartment, Jake stared at the hospital's email notification, balance 0.00, and the words, "I'm sorry I left." His fist clenched. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, Evelyn stood drenched, her designer coat soaked through, holding a familiar tattered copy of Goodnight Moon. "I couldn't wait 5 more years," she choked out. Jake's pulse roared in his ears. Then, from behind him, Noah's sleepy voice. "Mommy's here for story time." Evelyn's knees buckled. Jake caught her arm, their first touch in half a decade, sending a current through them both. The book fell open to a pressed dandelion, the one Noah had given her in the park the week before she left. "You kept it," Jake rasped. Noah patted forward, his fever-flushed face alight. Evelyn dropped to his level, her tears mixing with rain. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. "Can I stay for the story?" Jake exhaled hard, his grip on the doorframe tightening. But when Noah reached for Evelyn's hand, his small fingers bridging the gap between past and present, Jake stepped aside. The storm outside softened to a hush, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The gift box sat unopened on Jake's kitchen counter for 3 days. Every time he passed it, his stomach, twisted part of him, wanted to hurl it into the dumpster behind their building. The other part remembered the way Evelyn's hands had shaken when she handed it to him. On the 4th morning, Noah's fever spiked again. Jake's calloused fingers fumbled with the thermometer as the numbers climbed 103.2 degrees. The pediatrician's office was booked solid. Desperate, he dialed the only number he knew could cut through red tape. Evelyn picked up on the first ring. "Jake." Her voice was raw, like she hadn't slept. "Noah's sick," he gritted out. "I'm sending a car." The line went dead. 20 minutes later, a black SUV idled outside their apartment. Not just any car, Evelyn herself stood by the door, her designer coat swapped for a faded Northwestern hoodie Jake recognized from college. "Get in," she said, already reaching for Noah. Jake hesitated, but when Noah whimpered, "Mommy," he surrendered. The hospital waiting room was a blur of white coats and hushed urgency. Evelyn spoke in low tones to a doctor, her CEO authority cutting through bureaucracy. Within minutes, Noah was in a private room, an IV dripping antibiotics into his tiny arm. Jake slumped into a chair, exhaustion and guilt crashing over him. "You didn't have to do this," he muttered. Evelyn sank beside him, her fingers brushing Noah's curls. "Yes, I did." She pulled a crumpled photo from her pocket. Noah's first birthday frosting smeared across his cheeks. Jake grinning behind him. "I've carried this every day, even when you sent my letters back." Jake's breath hitched. Outside, rain streaked the windows, but the room was preternaturally still. Then, Noah stirred, his glassy eyes focusing on Evelyn. "Mommy," he whispered, "will you tell the dragon story?" Evelyn's tears fell freely as she began the tale she'd invented when he was a newborn, the one about the knight who got lost but found his way home. Jake watched them, the old wound in his chest splitting wider. But this time, instead of anger, something else bled through. When the story ended, Noah asleep between them, Evelyn met Jake's gaze. "I'm not asking for a second chance," she said. "Just let me be there when he needs me." Jake studied her, the smudged mascara, the way her thumb traced Noah's palm like a lifeline. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out the unopened gift box. "You should give him this yourself." Evelyn's gasp was barely audible as she took it. But it was the way Jake's hand lingered on hers, just a heartbeat too long, that told her everything. The past wasn't forgiven. But maybe it wasn't the end. The kite string slipped through Jake's fingers as he watched Noah dart across the grassy slope of Millennium Park. Evelyn, jogging behind him with that same determined grace she'd once used to chase subway trains. Their laughter carried on the wind, mingling with the chime of the Cloud Gate sculpture nearby. A month ago, he would have bristled at this scene. Now, he found himself snapping a photo with his cracked phone. Then Noah tripped. Jake was on his feet before the boy even hit the ground. But Evelyn got there first. She cradled his scraped knee with hands that had negotiated million-dollar deals, now wiping dirt away with the hem of her sweater. "Superheroes always get back up," she murmured, pressing a Batman bandage over the wound. Noah's tears stopped, mid-sniffle. "Like when you came back?" Evelyn's breath caught. Over his head, her eyes locked with Jake's wide, vulnerable. The unspoken question hung between them. Was this coming back? A gust of wind sent the kite spiraling into a tree. "Oh, no, the mission!" Noah wailed. Without a word, Jake hoisted him onto his shoulders, while Evelyn grabbed a fallen branch. For one suspended moment, their hands brushed as they worked to free the tangled string. Then, with a pop, the kite broke loose, just as Noah's small fingers closed around both of theirs. "Teamwork," he declared. Jake's throat tightened. The late afternoon sun gilded Evelyn's profile as she smiled up at them, and suddenly he was back in that Coney Island photo booth, her lips whispering forever against his cheek. The memory should have burned. Instead, it warmed something long frozen inside him. That night, as he tucked Noah into bed, the boy clutched the new Iron Man figure Evelyn had brought. "Daddy," he whispered, "can Mommy read the dragon story again tomorrow?" Jake smoothed the sheets, buying time. Through the bedroom window, he could see Evelyn still sitting on their fire escape, her silhouette etched against the city lights. He walked to the window, slid it open. The autumn air smelled of caramelized nuts from the street vendor below. "You heard the boss," he called out, voice rough but lighter than it had been in years. "You're on story duty." Evelyn turned, her face illuminated by the glow of Noah's nightlight. And for the first time in half a decade, Jake didn't look away. The wind howled through the Chicago streets as Jake carried a sleeping Noah up the stairs to their apartment, Evelyn trailing silently behind them. The invitation to her corporate world still hung between them like a live wire. When they reached the door, Noah stirred, his sleepy voice muffled against Jake's shoulder. "Mommy's coming in, right?" Jake's grip tightened. He could feel Evelyn holding her breath behind him. Then the power went out. Pitch black swallowed the hallway. Noah whimpered, small fingers digging into Jake's neck. Before Jake could react, Evelyn's phone flashlight flickered on, casting a warm glow. "Superheroes aren't afraid of the dark," she murmured, pressing a kiss to Noah's forehead. The boy relaxed instantly. Something in Jake's chest cracked. Inside, Evelyn moved through the apartment with practiced ease, lighting candles, finding spare blankets. Jake watched, stunned, as she pulled a box of graham crackers from the exact cabinet she'd always kept them in 5 years ago. "Emergency rations," she said with a tentative smile. Noah giggled, cramming a cracker into his mouth. "Mommy remembers." The storm raged outside, rattling the windows. Jake lit the last candle, its flicker catching the scar on Evelyn's wrist, a thin white line he didn't recognize. She noticed him staring. "Indonesia," she said quietly. "The flood dragged me under a collapsed roof. I thought that was it." Her voice broke. All I could see was Noah's face. Jake's hands shook. He reached out, tracing the scar with his thumb, the first intentional touch he'd allowed himself in years. Evelyn's breath hitched. Then, Noah tugged her sleeve. "Tell the dragon story, Mommy," with voices. The candlelight danced across Evelyn's tear-streaked face as she began the tale. Jake listened, really listened, to the way she changed her voice for the fire-breathing dragon, the same silly growl she'd used when Noah was a newborn. Halfway through, Noah crawled into Jake's lap, his eyelids drooping. "Daddy," he whispered, "can we be a team, like the superheroes?" Evelyn's story faltered. Jake met her gaze over their son's head. Outside, the storm reached its crescendo thunder, shaking the walls. But here, in this fragile circle of light, something new was beginning. Jake pressed his lips to Noah's hair. "Yeah, buddy," he said hoarsely. "We can try." Evelyn's candle guttered out, but the ember between them burned brighter than ever. The hospital room was silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Moonlight streamed through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor, where Isabella's discarded heels lay haphazardly, the only evidence of her frantic rush to Daniel's side. Ben's soft snores filled the quiet as he slept, curled against Isabella, his tiny fingers still clutching both her silk blouse and Daniel's hospital gown, binding them together in his sleep. Daniel studied Isabella's face in the dim light. The smudged mascara, the way her lips parted slightly as she dozed. A memory surfaced, their first date at that dive bar near the fire station, how she'd laughed when he spilled beer on his uniform. The recollection should have stung. Instead, it warmed the cold places in his chest. A sudden gasp, tore from Isabella's throat as she jolted awake, her hands flying to Ben. "I dreamed," she began, then froze when she found Daniel watching her. In the pale light, he saw it. The same raw terror he'd felt when the truck's headlights had come screaming toward him. "They said you might need surgery," she whispered, her voice cracking. Before he could respond, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. The hospital transfer forms trembled in her hands. "I had them move you to the best orthopedic wing. My company's insurance will cover." Daniel's fingers closed over hers, stopping her. "Bella," he said quietly. The nickname slipped out unbidden, rusty from years of disuse. "Look at me." When she met his gaze, he saw the truth. This wasn't about money or control. The woman who commanded boardrooms was terrified of losing him. Again. Ben stirred between them, his sleepy murmur breaking the tension. "Daddy's gonna be okay. Superheroes always get back up." Isabella's composure shattered. She pressed her forehead to Ben's, her shoulders shaking. Daniel watched them, the last of his resistance crumbling. With effort, he lifted his uninjured arm and cupped the back of Isabella's neck, drawing her close, until their breaths mingled. Outside, dawn painted the Seattle skyline in gold. Somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the city was waking. But here, in this quiet room, something far more precious was being rebuilt. One fractured piece at a time. The birthday cake sat half-eaten on the coffee table. Chocolate frosting smeared across Ben's cheeks as he brandished a cardboard sword at his giggling friends. Isabella watched from the kitchen doorway, her designer blouse dusted with flour from baking the cake herself. Her first attempt ever. A lump formed in her throat as Daniel limped across the room to refill juice boxes, wincing, but refusing to sit down. "Let me help," she murmured, stepping forward to take the pitcher from his hands. Their fingers brushed, sending a current through them both. Daniel didn't let go immediately, his calloused thumb tracing the scar on her wrist. The one from Indonesia. "You never told me how bad it was," he said quietly, his voice rough. Isabella's breath caught. The memory of those floodwaters, the crushing weight of debris, the months spent recovering in a foreign hospital with no way to contact them. It all rushed back. "I tried to find you," she whispered. "When I finally got back to Seattle, your old apartment was empty. The fire station said you'd quit." A burst of laughter erupted from the living room as Ben rescued his teddy bear from the evil laundry basket. Daniel's gaze flickered to their son, then back to Isabella. "I had to leave. After you. After Ben kept asking for you." His jaw tightened. Couldn't stand the memories in that place. The admission hung between them, raw and painful. Isabella's vision blurred. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The resignation letter she'd submitted that morning. "Daniel, I'm done with skyscrapers and boardrooms," she said, her voice trembling. "I want to be here. For Ben. For—" Her courage faltered. A crash came from the living room, followed by sudden silence. They turned to see Ben standing amid toppled chairs, his lower lip trembling. "I broke it," he whimpered, holding up the halves of his favorite superhero figurine, the one Daniel had painstakingly repaired weeks earlier. Before Daniel could move, Isabella was kneeling beside Ben. "Hey, superheroes fix things," she said softly, producing a tube of glue from her pocket. "Let's do it together." As they worked her hands steady around Ben's small fingers, Daniel watched from the doorway. Something shifted in his chest. The final wall crumbling. He crossed the room in 3 uneven strides, sinking down beside them. When Isabella looked up, tears in her eyes, he cupped her face with one hand and pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay." He breathed the word, both plea and promise. Outside, the setting sun painted the Seattle skyline in fiery hues. But in that small apartment with glue-sticky fingers and mended toys, a different kind of light was dawning. The last balloon popped under Ben's sneaker as he twirled in exhaustion, his superhero cape now wrinkled, and his energy finally spent. Isabella knelt to wipe chocolate from his cheeks, her fingers lingering as she memorized the feel of his warm skin. When she looked up, Daniel was watching them, his crutch forgotten against the wall, his dark eyes soft in the golden light. "Story time," Ben announced, grabbing both their hands and dragging them toward the couch. He wedged himself between them, his head drooping onto Isabella's shoulder, as Daniel reached for the worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, the same one they'd read to him as a baby. Isabella's breath hitched when Daniel's arm brushed hers as he turned the pages. Halfway through, Ben's breathing evened out his small body, going slack with sleep. Neither parent moved. "I kept this," Daniel murmured, pulling a Polaroid from the book's pages. Their first family photo taken at a carnival photo booth weeks before Ben was born. The edges were frayed, the colors faded, but their joy was unmistakable. Isabella traced the image with a trembling finger. "I thought you'd burned all our pictures," she whispered. Daniel's thumb brushed her wrist where Ben's plastic bracelet still sat. "Couldn't do it." The admission hung between them, fragile as the evening light. Outside Seattle's skyline glittered towers Isabella had built rising in the distance. But here, in this shabby apartment, something more important was being reconstructed. Ben stirred, mumbling in his sleep as he grasped both their hands and pulled them together over his chest. Isabella felt Daniel's fingers intertwine with hers, his grip firm and sure for the first time in 5 years. No words were needed. The quiet promise in his touch said everything. The past was forgiven, the future theirs to reclaim. As the last light of day faded, the three of them sat entwined, a family rediscovered in the space between heartbeats. The radiator hissed in the corner as a winter wind rattled the windows. Isabella stared at the photograph in her hands, the edges worn soft from years of handling. She could almost smell the cherry blossoms from that long-ago afternoon in the park, could still feel the way Daniel's arms had wrapped around her waist as the camera clicked. "I kept something too," she whispered. From her pocket, she produced a battered Swiss Army knife, the one Daniel had given her when she'd first moved to the city. Carried it through every flood, every boardroom, every lonely night. The metal was worn smooth where her thumb had rubbed it raw with longing. Daniel's breath caught. He reached out, turning the knife over to see his initials still scratched into the side, the same way firefighters marked their gear. His calloused finger traced the letters. "You never stopped carrying you with me," she finished. Ben, sensing the shift, wedged himself between them, his drawing fluttering to the floor. "Daddy," he said solemnly, pressing a small hand to Daniel's stubbled cheek. "Superheroes forgive." The simplicity of it shattered Daniel's last resistance. He pulled Ben into a fierce hug, then before he could second-guess himself, reached for Isabella. Their foreheads touched breaths, mingling in the space between them. Outside, the first snow of December began to fall, blanketing the city in quiet. But inside that cramped apartment with Ben's arms around them both, and 5 years of hurt dissolving in their tears, something miraculous was happening. Daniel didn't say the words. Not yet. But when Isabella leaned in to kiss Ben goodnight, he caught her hand and pressed it to his chest right over the scar from the fire that had nearly killed him years ago. The one she'd tenderly bandaged in another lifetime. Her answering smile was brighter than all the Christmas lights twinkling across Seattle. The future stretched before them, still uncertain, still fragile, but for the first time in half a decade, it was a future they'd face together. The Christmas lights twinkled like captured stars, as Daniel steadied Ben on his shoulders, the boy's small hands stretching toward the tree's highest branch. Isabella stood behind them, her arms wrapped around both, completing the circle. As the star settled into place, its reflection shimmered in the ornament, balls distorted mirrors, showing not 3 separate people, but a single unit intertwined. Ben's delighted squeal broke the moment. "Look, it's magic!" He pointed to where their reflections merged in the bauble, his child's wisdom cutting through years of heartache. Daniel didn't need the carved frame to know this was forever. He saw it in the way Isabella's laughter lines crinkled, as she helped Ben unpack ornaments in the careful way she'd learned to make his terrible coffee just how he liked it. The proof was in the charity event she'd organized not for publicity, but because she'd remembered 5 years ago he'd mentioned how hard holidays were for hospital kids. When the last ornament hung, Daniel pulled Isabella into the kitchen under pretense of checking the cookies. The scent of burnt sugar, her one domestic failure, clung to her sweater as he pressed her against the fridge, their son's giggles floating in from the living room. "I was thinking," he murmured against her lips, "maybe we make it official again. Not for Ben, for us." The cookie sheet clattered to the floor as Isabella surged forward, her kiss tasting of peppermint and promises. From the doorway, Ben announced with 5-year-old solemnity, "I want cupcakes at the wedding." Laughter echoed through the apartment, mingling with the tinny sound of a Christmas carol on the radio. Outside, snow began to fall on Seattle, blanketing the city in quiet beauty. But inside, surrounded by tangled lights and mismatched ornaments, something far more precious was being celebrated, a love that had weathered floods and fire and emerged against all odds unbroken. The glow of the Christmas tree painted the room in liquid gold as Daniel knelt to plug in the last string of lights. Isabella leaned against the doorway, watching Ben carefully arrange his superhero figurines beneath the branches, a makeshift nativity scene only a child could invent. The scent of pine and cinnamon wrapped around them like a promise. "Heroes Haven got its first major donor today," Isabella said softly, handing Daniel a mug of cocoa. "The Seattle Firefighters Union." Daniel's throat tightened. He hadn't stepped foot in a firehouse since the accident that ended his career. But Isabella had bridged that gap for him, honoring his past while building their future. Ben suddenly gasped, holding up an ornament they'd missed, a tiny glass firefighter helmet with Daddy, etched in gold. "Look, it's you!" Daniel's calloused fingers trembled as he took it. The date on the back, the year Ben was born, struck him like a physical blow. Isabella's hand found his shoulder. "I bought it the Christmas before." Her voice broke. "I couldn't bring myself to hang it alone." The ornament found its place at the very center of the tree, reflecting 100 points of light. As Ben danced around them, singing off-key carols, Daniel pulled Isabella close, his lips brushing her temple. "You kept us alive all those years," he murmured. "Even when you were gone." Outside, snow began to fall in fat, lazy flakes, Seattle's rare Christmas gift. Through the window, the Space Needle glittered in the distance, but its height was nothing compared to how far they'd climbed from that first painful hospital encounter. Ben crashed into their legs, demanding hot chocolate and a story. As Isabella lifted him, Daniel reached for the book she'd brought home that evening, a first edition of the Polar Express, its spine cracked from years of love. "Once upon a time," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "there was a family who got a second chance." The camera might have faded to black then, but their story was just beginning, written not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments like these: a lopsided tree, a child's laughter, and 2 broken people who'd finally found their way home. End scene. P.S. If this story reminded you that love deserves a second act, smash that like button. For more real-life fairy tales, subscribe and hit the bell. Your next dose of hope is just a click away. What moment resonated most with you? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. After all, every view is another light on someone's dark night.